Okay, once again, we're all welcome to panel 51. The impact of COVID-19 on displacement crisis rising, resulting from natural disaster. So there will be 3 presentations holding in the morning section. Okay, Sarah, there's a message for you on the screen on how to log in using Zoom. Maybe you can go through the message.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So based on this, we have 2 sessions and 3 presenters will be going in the morning session. Myself, Sarah, and myself, I'll be presenting a paper. Sarah will also be presenting a paper, and Clayton will also be presenting a paper. So at each of us will sorry, I didn't know I was muted. So sorry about that. Each of us will be having 15 minutes for our presentation, and after the presentation, we have a Q&A session, where discussion and interactions. Then for clarification on the paper that is presented, then the presenter will have to react to questions that are raised. So I don't know, Sarah, if you are good to go, then don't worry, I will take the floor now and do my presentation. After my presentation, there will be a Q&A session. Then your presentation will come up. After your presentation, then Clayton will have his own presentation. So I will be sharing my slide now. I will be presenting on the impact of climate change on human mobility and livelihood in Nigeria. So I'm presenting on behalf of my co-presenters, my co-authors. As a way of background, natural disaster related to climate change are one of the drivers of the displacement or migration. And developing countries in the tropical region have been identified as particularly vulnerable to climate change because they have the resources to enhance adaptability to climate change. Climate change on its own actually does not cause people to move or displace people. However, it acts as a risk factor to cause a multiplier effect on people, making them vulnerable in their respective residents. One of the sustainable development goals is to mitigate climate change and reduce the impact by building resilience and limiting climate-related hazards in natural disaster. The consequences of climate change on mobility on humanity has caused a unique challenge globally. Then we have types of mobility. Within human mobility, there are 3 phenomena embedded in human mobility. We have migration, and in the migration, we have people moving voluntarily on their own, temporarily, seasonally, or permanently to other locations. It could be within their own country or across international border. But the key thing in migration is that the choice to migrate is based on the individual involved. However, in displacement, individuals are actually forced to leave their home. They have no choice of where to go or when to move. But based on incidents happening around their environment, they are forced to move to a different location. And most of those people under displacement have this challenge of resources of having to establish themselves on the new location they are moving to. Then we also have the planned relocation. This is actually an organized form of movement that is carried out by the state. In this kind of relocation, there's an informed consent of the individual involved or the community concerned. And there's also an adequate provision for reestablishing life and livelihood for those involved. Now, in the context of Nigeria, Nigeria is an agrarian country, and over 70% of Nigerian population is actually engaged in agriculture as their primary occupation and means of livelihood. Agricultural production in Nigeria is mostly rain-fed, and rain variation pose a challenge for farmers on how to plan their activities or operations in the farm. Nigeria is blessed with 2 main seasons. We have the dry season and the wet season. And Nigeria is also challenged by various types of disaster ranging within, causing from climate, environmental, and man-made disaster. There are actually two main parts in which climate change can affect human mobility in Nigeria. We have the one resulting from sudden onset disasters such as flood, extreme temperature, as we have in the northern part of the country. We have landslides commonly within the southern part of the country. We have storms, which could be the sandstorm or the dust storm, and we also have coastal erosion. Another part again that also causes climate change for human mobility within the country is slow onset disaster resulting from this drought or desertification. Flood is one of the most devastating climate environmental hazard in Nigeria, responsible for a greater number of displacement outside conflict and communal clashes or unrest in Nigeria. The incidence of flood in Nigeria is actually caused mainly from rising high water level of River Niger and Benue caused by heavy rainfall, making these two rivers to overflow their bank. And this is usually caused between the period of July through October. That's the peak of the dry season in the country. The impact of flood in Nigeria are similar to those experienced in every part of the world. However, the ability to manage and the ability of response of this country response of Nigeria differ from other countries in the world. The methodology, the data used for this paper, data availability in Nigeria is usually a challenge, and having a whole country-based data set for this paper was challenging. However, this paper made use of data sets recorded for the most worst hit states of the country. Nigeria is actually made up of 36 countries with federal territory. So we have most worst hit states in the country that are affected by flood. So the paper makes use of data set from them. And this data set is generated from Nigerian Red Cross Society, publication from Disaster Relief Emergency Fund, and publication from other scholar articles on climate impact. The focus of this paper is based on disaster input for flood situation in Nigeria, the implication of this disaster disruption on livelihoods of the individuals in those locations, and the measures available to address victims of extreme environmental events, especially in the face of COVID-19 pandemic. Situation report. Following from the data available, the flood incident from 2018 to 2020, it was observed that 2020 recorded the highest level of individuals affected by flood in the country, as collated from the 5 most hit countries and most hit states in Nigeria, with 91,254 persons affected by flood in 2020. And the total households also affected by flood is also high in 2020, with a total of 15,209 persons household affected, and the total number displaced is also high for 2020. We have over 22,357 persons displaced, as against 5,549 and 4,489 for 2018 and 2019 respectively. However, when it comes to the death toll recorded, 2018 has the highest death toll, with a total number of 81 individuals who lost their life to flood. Now, based on the fact that 2020 we recorded of a highest people were affected by identifying the state. We have that in Jigawa, Kebbi, Kwara, Sokoto, and Zamfara. These were the worst hit states in the country as of 2020. And among these five states, Kwara State experienced the most affected individuals with respect to flood, and they recorded 37,740 persons affected by flood. Coming to the household affected by flood, Kwara also recorded the highest highest household affected by flood, with a total of 6,219 households affected by flood. These households that were affected by flood, they lost their properties, their house were destroyed, the roof were off. Invariably, their environment was not favorable for them to stay, so they had to migrate. They were displaced to possible IDP camps around their location. So the total people displaced within that 2020 for Kwara State, to have, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. For Kwara State, we have a total of 7,745 persons displaced, and it was next in line with Kebbi State with over 5,000 people displaced by the flood in 2020. Other casualty resulting from flood, we have the incident of mortality, we have incident of injury, we have evacuation. And for the incident of injury, Kwara State recorded 236 people that sustained injury with but have a low level of mortality as compared to Jigawa, Sokoto, as compared to Jigawa and Zamfara. So it will be of great concern to wonder, in 2020, we're having most of these states that are worst hit by flood incidents in Nigeria to come from the northern parts of the country. When we are more aware that the northern part of the country, they experience lower incidents of rainfall compared to the southern part. It is of interest to know that the northern part of the country is the food bank of the country. Agriculture is predominant there, and they are into irrigation agriculture. So most of these states, they have reservoir dam constructed for them to have water available for their crop for irrigation. So during the rainy season, when the River Niger and Benue plains are flooded, the water overflow to the plains, and those dams and reservoirs that are constructed for irrigation purpose are overflooded, and this go off flooding the farmlands that are available in those communities, thereby increasing flood incidents in those locations. Implication of flood on livelihood. Changes caused by shift in climate impact the ecosystem upon which people's livelihood and economy depend on for food. Water, among other things, are also affected because their incidents of cholera, diarrhea become prominent during the period of flood incidents. The effects of a flood could be negative or positive depending on the severity or extremity of the shift in climate change. So I divided the implication of climate change on livelihoods. I have implication on agricultural production. I have implication on fishing communities. Agricultural production is affected during flooding incidents. Crops are lost before harvest season, so there's little or no harvest for the farmers. All efforts put in production are usually lost at that period. Then we have large expanse of farmland submerged in water. This is prominent in the northern part of the country and southern part of Nigeria. There's dislodgement of economic tree for those that are into cash crops. And we have soil degradation, which is highly prominent for communities within the coastal region, because there is high incidence of erosion that washed away the topsoil, making the soil so unfit for production. Livestock are actually swept away during flood, and it's also impact on trading activity for agricultural commodities. for those involved in the value chain for agricultural production, those for input supplies, those for processing, those for marketing and commuting, their activities are affected, because when the farmers do not have enough to harvest or do not harvest at all, those for processing will not have anything to process. Those commuting for transportation for commodity from the farm to the marketplaces will not have anything to commute for consumers to buy. Implication on fishing communities. Excessive flood displaced fish colonies from their habitats to other habitats. So as water volume rises, fishes intend to move with the flow of the water, and they migrate from their usual habitat to other habitats. And there's also, as a result of that, there's a depletion in fish stock available within that fishing community, and livelihood is lost, in the sense that within the fishing community, their main occupation is fishing. So the fishermen are actually out of employment because of the high volume of water. They cannot go for fishing. Fishes are displaced from their usual habitat. This is a picture of a situation report in the northern part. This is a farmland, maize farmland flooded, and we have, this is a rice field. Usually we have a lowland rice production, but this water level is way above the lowland requirement for rice production. These are people, flood situation of people fleeing their home and a community that is totally submerged in water. Measures for taking care of casualties that are affected by climate and environmental hazard. In the face of COVID-19, we know with the incident of COVID-19, a whole new structure of how our living condition actually changed, because so many people most of us, we have to observe the COVID-19 protocol of social distancing, regular washing of our hands, wearing of face masks. But these COVID-19 protocols were not easily effective in camps where people that are affected by flood or people that are affected by other natural disaster or communal clashes were being hosted. So emergency shelter and household supplies were actually provided for all these people to help them. Water purification was done for them to assist them so that they will not come down with incidents of cholera or diarrhea. Building of emergency latrines and bathroom facilities, emergency repair of latrine, hygiene and food items were provided for them, and healthcare services, especially in the face of COVID-19, for them to be able to not to come down or increase the incidence of the spread of the virus. Then food supply to IDP camps were prominent, and these were done by the Red Cross Society, by NEMA, and by SEMA. So then the Red Cross Society also collaborates their efforts with the National Emergency Management Agency. Then community advocacy and environmental sanitation, mobilization and sensitizations about incidents of flood were also one of the key measures that should be done. Regularly, information from NIMET regarding the weather situation of the country is usually given as a forecast, but many times based on policy situation and framework in the country, these are not actually adhered to, and the country has this issue of waiting until a disaster occurs, then we start having this attitude of trying to combat that effect. So there should be adequate sensitization and community advocacy on how to mitigate all this. So thank you. This is all for my presentation. So I appreciate your time for listening, and I'll be available for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Agatha, for your presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, I noticed that you just focus on your tables and your graphs were just showing 4 states of the federation. So I don't know, is it just that's the only areas you focused on, or you're looking at Nigeria? You know, I'm trying to get that, cleared. I noticed just 4 states were indicated in your graph and in your, So can you just throw more light on that?
Yeah, actually, for want of data, challenge of data for the purpose of this paper presentation, data were readily available for the most worst hit states by flood, and we have 5 states for the 2020. I had to focus more on 2020 because that's just the recent past year, instead of dwelling on 2018, 2019. However, from the situation report, I make a chart of what was obtainable in 2018, 2019, and 2020. But in the breakdown of people affected by the data provided by the states that were available, so I focused on 2020. So for want of data, that's why you have those 5 states mentioned in the graph.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no other questions, or I don't know. Sarah, you have any reaction to the presentation?
Oh, no, I don't.
Okay. Victor, do you have any reaction to the presentation?
All right, thank you very much.
Hello, Victor.
Yes, I can hear.
Hello, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I must say you did a very good job. X-ray flooding in Nigeria. But I think I want to pose it as a question. In terms of your methodology, I think I'm more concerned about your methodology, and given the face of COVID-19, how were you able to manage data gathering, having also to comply with COVID-19 protocols to gather data? And it's what flood comes with a whole lot of disaster implications, where very floody areas, and then you still need to get down there to meet your respondents to gather data for your study. I really don't know how you're able to manage data gathering alongside, following up or adhering to COVID-19 protocols. I think it's something I'm really concerned about. Thank you very much, Agatha.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, the study did not use primary data that involve you going out to meet your respondents to ask about their perception or their impact on flood situation. The study made use of secondary data sets, which were generated from Red Cross Society and the reports, emergency reports from disaster refuge from management. So it was a secondary data gathering that was used, which were available online. The only challenge was that having a holistic data set for Nigeria as a whole was difficult. Information were readily available for the most hit states by flood, and those data for how many people that were affected, people that were displaced, injury, the number of deaths recorded, those were information provided, and it was only available for those states of the country that were highly hit by flood in those years of consideration in the study. So there was no physical movement having to meet the respondent to collect data for this paper. I don't know if I answered your question.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Actually, I think I joined late. I joined a little bit late, and
okay.
I really did not follow up your methodologies, and that's why
Okay.
that's what
Okay.
prompted the question. Very sorry about that.
Oh, no
Thank you.
problem. It's welcome. It's welcome. It's highly welcome. Thank you so much. So, do we have any reactions from any of us here? If there are no reactions, I would like to end my presentation and call on the next presenter, Sarah Dewa, to come up with a presentation. So, Sarah.
All right, thank you. I'll share my screen.
Okay. I should share your screen?
I'll try and do it from here. Thank you.
Okay, okay. That's good.
Can you see my screen?
Yes. Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, please hold. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I am Sarah Dewa, and I'll be presenting on behalf of the remaining authors. I'll be presenting on environmental displacement crisis in the face of COVID-19 in West Africa. Please permit me to resume this. Okay, fine. So just a background to this study. As we know, displacement has been on the increase due to conflict, violence, as well as disaster in sub-Saharan Africa. The West African region indeed has not been left out because there's been high incidences of flood, as well as drought and other climate-related incidences, some of them related to geophysical activities such as earthquakes, as well as tumors and wildfires. In 2020, the number of those that were newly displaced, which includes those that were formerly displaced, as well as those that were newly displaced in 2020 due to disaster in West Africa, was estimated at 6,222,470 persons, as compared to 323,067 persons in 2011. A critical examination of natural disaster has actually shown that it has resulted in losses of properties, loss of livelihood, livestock, especially for farmers, and total loss of crops, and in some cases, just partial loss. It has also resulted in some cases in death. And due to this level of displacement, a lot of them end up in camp or camp-like settings, or some even reside in probably host communities that are not necessarily in a camp. And due to the overcrowded living condition, it's obvious that some of them have limited access to social protection, as well as limited access to basic services, because a lot of them compete to use the limited resources within the camp settings. This living condition actually makes it extremely difficult for people to implement the measures put in place by government, such as social distancing, as well as isolation, to reduce the spread of COVID-19, thereby increasing the likelihood of the risk of the virus spread among the vulnerable group. Looking at this makes us realize that actually migrant communities are very susceptible to the pandemic, although there has been argument that it's not really the case, because it's been said that the elites are actually the ones that actually suffer from the COVID-19 pandemic as compared to people in the rural areas. So this study will, to an extent, give us, make us understand how people within the settings, that's the camp settings or outside camp settings are actually coping with the effect of COVID-19 in the various countries in West Africa. Basically, the objective of the study are to identify the types of natural disasters and their trend in West Africa, as well as identify measures put in place to mitigate the adverse effect of climate change and disaster reduction. Then describe the implication of COVID-19 on internally displaced persons. Then finally, identify the roles played by both government and non-governmental organizations in reducing COVID-19 spread, especially amongst IDPs. Okay, my methodology, I basically used secondary data. For some of the charts I did, the data was obtained from the IDMC monitoring database, while others were extracted from papers, articles, and relief websites. This table 1 actually shows the common hazard types that are existing in 15 countries. Out of the West African countries, I extracted 15 because they were the ones that actually had data available, although it was not so comprehensive. And I realized that looking at it, that majority of them had one thing in common. They had flood. The incidence of flood was common across all West African countries, followed closely by storm. Then in some few cases, we had issues with wildfire, as well as dry mass movement. A typical example was the dry mass movement that occurred in Sierra Leone in 2017, where there were so many losses of lives. From this figure just shows natural hazards in Africa. It's depicting what happened in Lagos some years back. This, for the first part of the figure, we'll notice that this is an urban center. The roads were basically flooded with vehicles stuck in water and people pushing. And the thing is, once there's disaster, a lot of people have this habit of wanting to stand to see what's happening. They will hardly ever render assistance. Then this other one is showing that a particular farm, that's a maize farm, was almost submerged with flood. Then the last one is showing that is showing the effect of drought in the northern part of the country. For the second fig, this shows drought in northern Ghana, while we have incidents of flood in Niger and the mudslide that occurred in Sierra Leone in 2017. This figure shows the trend of natural disaster in West Africa, covering the period of 2008 to 2020. And looking at it, we would realize that the period of 2012 had the highest number of newly displaced individuals. This was a period that was marked with flood across so many countries: Niger, Nigeria, Chad, as well as Mali. And looking at the geography of Nigeria and the countries that are the closest neighbor, we realize that they are all closely joined by the Lake Chad, River Niger, River Benue. So once there's so much torrential rainfall, it floods the river banks and as well goes downstream to affect other people that are downstream. Now, in order for us to have an idea of why it's important to look at the internally displaced persons in camps across West Africa, looking at the way they stay will make us understand that the living conditions are not so favorable to keeping them or preventing them from catching some diseases, not just COVID-19, because looking at statistics that has been given over time, it's obvious that most of the people in camps do not really suffer from COVID-19, but from other diseases related to diarrhea, measles, even hunger. So I'll go in line for the second objective. We decided that we're going to look at the effect of. I wanted to look at how to reduce disaster risk. Looking at the IOM, that's the International Organization of Migration Strategic Work Plan on disaster risk reduction, they identify specific activities that they feel that countries as well as organizations should be able to utilize to take care of the issues related to disaster. Basically, disaster risk management is trying to say that it's a systematic process of trying to reduce the risk or mitigating the adverse effect of disaster. So in this case, they have identified several activities. Some of the activities include community-based disaster risk management. Yeah, in all honesty, you need the community to be involved in disaster risk management, because most of the time they tend to use most of the management strategies they use after being affected by disaster are still the ones that actually make them prone to disaster. So it's important that you teach them and train them on the perfect way for them to be able to avoid disasters. Then we have policies and strategies. Several countries in West Africa actually has policies and laws that they've formulated that are being used. Some of them include the child right law. Some of them include disaster risk management strategies. You have several plans. You have several strategies that exist. Then disaster preparedness and emergency response. There are already plans put in place on how to respond to various kinds of disasters. Then there are issues of early warning systems. Early warning systems are good. It works perfectly well in the developed countries. But in West Africa and Africa generally, we realize that at times at the national level, it's working fine. But for the individual, for the household, it's a challenge because some of them are not even aware there's something. Nobody knows, oh yes, this place is prone to flood and there's a possibility that you'll be faced with this challenge. This will happen on so and so day. We need you to evacuate. All these kind of plans are not in place. Then infrastructure support. Their efforts should be made to create infrastructures. It could be in terms of probably the houses and places where they will stay. And in areas, if we will notice that in urban centers, there's high incidence of flood. If there's proper planning, road planning with lots of drainages, we will have less hazard associated with disaster. Then multi-hazard risk assessment, we need to be able to compare how does it affect various sectors. Some of these sectors are interlinked. It's not just probably one sector, it's not just agriculture. Then plant relocation, there should be plans in place. Oh, if something happens here, this is where we'll move them to. Then resilience livelihood development. You should come up with systems. Oh, some of these people are going to lose their livelihood. We should be able to create alternate livelihood. Oh, there should be livelihood diversification so that they'll be able to bounce back after the adverse effect of disaster. Others include shift to best practices in risk prevention and mitigation. You should, there's a need to include, there's a need to engage in adopting international best practices with regards to mitigation. You should shift to, farmers should move to climate smart agriculture so that their crops are resilient. They should get improved seedlings that are drought resistant, amongst others. Then for one of the projects is the Green Tree Wall project. It's a project that is occurring in 11 countries, or albeit 5 of them are from West Africa. Planting of trees shields the soil from erosion, from losing the top cover and that. This table just presents a general overview of some of the laws and policies that are existing across some of the West African countries. Like I earlier stated, some of them are laws that has to do with even setting up of ministries that will address the issues related to the internally displaced, amongst others. Then the effect of COVID-19, the effects are diverse. In 2020, because I basically based, the focus of the study was basically fixed on the data for 2020, and we realized that during the COVID-19, there was increase in income and job losses. A lot of people lost their jobs because their industry closed down, as well as about 1.6 billion informal workers lost 60% of their income. It led to 11.9% employment in West Africa. There was also reduction in remittances for those that were getting remittances from abroad. There was decline in remittances. It reduced the purchasing power of people due to increase in commodity prices. You had to spend more to get less commodity. There was an increase in food insecurity, reduction in migration and resettlement scheme. This was obvious because at the point where the borders were closed, a lot of countries had to stop people from moving in, especially if they had to resettle scheme, if they had to resettle them within their borders. Then the issues with health, for the health, a lot of them, because they had to share medical centers, coupled with the fact that an increase in violence led to closing of some of the health centers. So there were health challenges in some of the camps. Then with respect to education, many of the children that were going to school could not go to school because during the lockdown, majority of the governments across the world shut down schools. And for the children that could not, that did not have access to virtual learning, it was problematic for them. So some of the children that were maybe girls and some of the other children were more prone to, violence as well as other things. Then during the COVID-19, so many governments used lots of instruments. Some of the instruments used by countries during the COVID-19 at the national level, in most cases included flight restrictions. Out of 35 countries that were reviewed, 32 of them restricted flights into their countries. There were border closures in 31 countries. Export and import bans were placed, as well as bans on social gathering and curfew, and so many other instruments were used. With respect to preventing COVID-19, several governments in West Africa utilized several methods, and some non-governmental organizations were heavily involved in the prevention of COVID-19, especially amongst IDPs. One of the first initiatives was launched by the COVID-19 Risk Communication and Community Engagement digital platform. The aim of this platform was basically to create an avenue where they could have pamphlets and messages that could be in form of graphics, videos, as well as audios in English, French, and 18 other local languages, which were distributed to students as well as people in the urban centers for the prevention of COVID-19. In Burkina Faso, they actually had radio programs covering rural areas. In Ghana, as well as in Cote d'Ivoire, several people, they had e-volunteers as well as e-reporters and more than 300 grassroots women organizations who basically were involved in dissemination of information about COVID prevention. Religious leaders in the Sahel region also made efforts to communicate with the United Nations High Commission for Refugees to ensure that they were able to translate the World Health Organization guidance on religious practices in context of COVID-19. I'm sure a lot of us had, when the ban was lifted and the lockdown was lifted, several people had to go through certain measures when they had to go back to the to religious centers. Then the National Human Rights Commission in Nigeria also contributed to sensitization efforts on measures to curb the spread of the pandemic in camps for internally displaced persons, as well as in host communities and all. Then migration responses. In order to curtail the spread, in some cases, like in Nigeria, several nurses were deployed to certain boundaries in the country to measure temperatures of people as well as test them for COVID-19, while they also launched hotlines for people to report violations. In Senegal, remote legal counseling was created so as to continue giving the guidance they had been given in the past. Then in response to health, because the centers are limited, several government and non-governmental organizations are trying their best to ensure that they strengthen the infection prevention and healthcare responses by providing medical equipment and supplies, ambulances, sanitation products, amongst others. Then in order to facilitate social distancing in Borno, that's in Nigeria, 500 emergency decongestion shelter camps for the IDPs. Then response to education. Across several countries, there were lots of effort being made to giving to distributing solar powered radio sets to refugees. In Ghana, because some of the people in the IDPs did not own televisions. The United Nations High Commission for Refugees procured 20 television sets that were placed at strategic places within the camp so that students will have access to lessons. There were radio programs across different countries so that students are kept abreast with what's happening in the educational sectors. Most of the ministries of education actually tried to ensure that the lessons did not stop, especially for people that could not afford to pay for private lessons. Then in Burkina Faso, Guinea, and Liberia, the UNHCR continued to pay teachers incentives during the closures of schools for refugees and national teachers in refugee settings. So in conclusion, natural disaster is still very much on the rise and is still disrupting livelihoods, causing death, resulting in property loss and environmental degradation. And with the COVID-19 pandemic, there's a high likelihood that those vulnerable groups, most especially women, children, the elderly, youth, persons with disability, will experience the highest degree of socioeconomic marginalization due to increased exposure to risk, such as sexual exploitation and child labor. This is true for IDPs in camp-like settings and outside of camps due to increased health and transmission risk associated with crowded living conditions, poor shelter, poor sanitation and health services, coupled with poor nutrition and health status. Due to lack of data, one cannot simply distinguish the effect of COVID-19 on IDPs due to the summation of both conflict as well as disaster displacement. Although several efforts, that's laws, policies, strategies exist at the local, national, and global level, there's a need for adequate monitoring, early warning systems, as well as accountability and fairness and treatment of IDPs with dignity. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for your presentation. That was an in-depth research work. And from your slide, sorry, please.
Okay, please hold.
Okay. Environmental displacement crisis in the face of COVID-19 in West Africa. So she is done with her presentation. I would like participants to react. If you have any question. So the presenter is available to answer every question that will be raised. Any questions from participants? Okay. Is Chinyere available? Chinyere, are you still with us? Okay. Just for clarification purpose, Sarah, I just want to find out data available for you will say you got your data from ID something.
IDRC.
Okay, IDRC. Okay. So for these countries that were used for West Africa, they have a comprehensive data for the flood incidents available in that location in their country. Because I did something on Nigeria and I had this challenge of this data issue. So, but this gave an insight of what was actually done, and it's like, oh, it's challenging, like something I'll be able to get a data from this particular site. So that's why I'm trying to find out if there's a comprehensive data from them, if I want to do a further study in this particular area.
Yeah, there is, especially for Nigeria. There are several situational reports and studies that have been conducted, and there are also data with respect to displacement, conflicts, and other things. Then some of them you could actually extract them from the reports.
Or from their report.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much. So Chinyere, are you Ghana? We've lost her again. Apparently, just the four of us that are in the room, myself, yourself, and the tech person here.
Okay.
So the other numbers are out.
Yeah, probably network. Okay,
So
Chinyere is back.
Yeah, I guess. Okay, she's back.
Mm.
Okay. Thank you for this presentation.
All right, thank you. Can I stop sharing my screen now?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, you can. And from the chats, I got that there is nothing on Hover. There's no question on Hover for those viewing from Hover, because we have a viewing. You can view from Zoom. You can also view from Hover platform, and there's no question coming in from Hover platform. So, and I also want to find out. We have another presenter to come up. A presentation from Clayton, and I've not seen him in the room, so I don't know if he's ready for his presentation. So Clayton, if you are in the room, kindly either in Hover or in Zoom. Apparently in Zoom here, I can't see you. So if you are in Hover platform, kindly make your presentation.
He's not online.
It's not online. Okay. Still not online. So we still have time allocated for us for this panel. So if we have any discussion on a general note on the conference, we can as well share for knowledge purpose. I think Chinyere is out again.
Yeah. Oh, she's back.
Yeah, Chinyere, do you have any question? Your mic is mute. Unmute your mic.
I was thrown out.
Do you have any question? Oh. Is it my connection? I can't hear her.
Hello, Chinyere. Hello. I think it's
from
a
my
network.
connection?
It's a network.
Okay. What did she say?
It's a network. I think it's hanging.
Oh, okay. She's off again.
Yeah, I guess I'll use my phone. My laptop seems to be, network is hanging there. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yeah,
yeah, I'm using my phone right now. The network on my laptop is a bit shaky.
Okay. So
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you. And I was actually asking if you have any question or any addition as regarding the conference. We still have enough time. We still have like about 45 minutes before our panel session for the morning is over. So I want to know if you have anything to share for knowledge purpose with respect to DSA conference and for our panel.
Yeah, I was. I think during the week, I actually took time to join the session during the publication of I think Oxford Publishing. So I wanted to know how can one actually get to them to have one's work published? Because though I didn't participate fully in that session, but I actually joined them along the line. I don't know if you can answer that particular question, because I really want to, when one have some write-ups to publish, how can one get access to these ones to help out in that regard?
Okay. Actually, from the Hover platform, if you have the Hover platform, you have a section. If you go through, there are sections that were created on the Hover platform, from the agenda to attendees, then community. Then under the community, you have so many groups that are there. There are so many meetup. We have exhibition showcase. We have Q&A section. You have ask the organizer for anything. So there's other sessions there. So if you go through and you are able to see a session for get published or for the Oxford in particular, you can drop a message there. You can send a comment to them or ask any question of concern to you. And if you're unable to locate that book launch for that Oxford in that particular community, you can as well send a message to the organizers in ask the organizers anything in their section.
Okay.
The section for ask organizer anything. So you will be directed on what to do and how to go about that. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay. So anything that's relating to the conference, any queries, any clarification, you just go to that community section and search for the where you want your comment to be channeled to. You type in your comment and response will be given to you.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Any other thing? So I have something to share with us?
Oh, no. For now, no. So probably when we reconvene later in the day.
Okay. Okay. So
this session is going to be till 1:15. Sorry, this session is going to last till 11:15. So
till 11:45.
11:40.
11:45.
Okay. So the next session will be by
11:45. 11:45.
So the next one will be by what time?
The next session is by 2.
2, okay.
By 2:15. 2:15. 2:15.
Okay.
But I'm thinking if the last person.
2:15.
Hello, Agatha.
Okay, Sarah, you say something.
The last person to present is not yet here. So I'm thinking probably we'll wait. We wait until he comes. You understand? We just do not exit. So that it's like we're giving him a fair share, except probably he comes and joins the afternoon session. You understand? So
certainly we are going to be here till the official time for this morning session to be over, which is 11:45. So we will be here. So I'm just assuming he's having some challenge trying to connect. So hoping within the next 45 minutes or so, we'll be able to connect and also give his presentation.
Okay.
Okay, the name of the presenter is Clayton. Now I'm coming. Let me get the name for her. Let me respond to a message from her. I guess she will help us to see if he's possibly online to know.
Have you sent the name?
Yeah, I've sent the name to her. Yeah.
Okay, I think probably while waiting, maybe we just have some kind of discussion. I have some questions I'd like to ask us. Then probably we'll just discuss while we're waiting. So my first question is Chinyere still there?
Yeah, she's here.
Okay, fine. In the academia, I don't know if this is being recorded, but probably if the recording can, what about this point and you come back and, you know.
Okay, you mean?
Yeah, fine.
You mean if the recording can be paused?
Yeah, pause the beat. Yeah, while we have our discussion. I don't know.
I think
for me, it doesn't matter anyway, but.
Yeah.
So,
I'm thinking since it's within the time frame for the panel section, I don't think the recording will be stopped, but I will just.
No, it can actually be. It can be stopped because there was a panel I went to yesterday and there was a break. So it was paused until they went.
Okay, thank you so much. So we've actually, thank you all for your participation at this morning session. So unfortunately, we're able to handle 2 presentations for the morning session. Then Clayton was unable to connect with us. We hope in the afternoon session he will be able to connect. So we have a full presentation for the number of papers scheduled for this panel in the afternoon. And I'm also hoping that as we're able to make it for the morning session, we'll also be available in the afternoon session and be active as well. I thank you all for your active participation and our discussion so far. I think at this particular juncture, I want to say we should end this section, the morning section, and reconvene again by 2:15 for the afternoon session. So thank you all for your time.